Okay, well, I'm inclined to get started. I'm a believer in sort of starting at least close to on time. I guess it's 1:02, and the participant numbers are pretty good, but aren't increasing as quickly. So I think I'll start, and if people join over the next couple of minutes, that's still fine. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, alumni, students, staff, faculty, friends, community neighbors, uh, whatever it is that brings you to this panel discussion here. At the University of Waterloo today. You are warmly welcome, and so thank you for your participation. Welcome to the first Alumni Speaker Series session of 2023. My name is Paul Figut. I am the Associate Dean of Resources and Planning here in the Dean's Office in the Faculty of Engineering. I'm also a professor in System Design Engineering and alumnus from UW Electrical Engineering back in 1991. Today, we have a panel of experts from industry looking at the very timely issue of health and healthcare on a global scale. The challenges we face during global COVID-19 pandemic, clearly identify the importance understating it, the crucial role that technology and innovation can, should, and will play in the future of healthcare. So, in quotes, physicianeers, so to speak, those medical or clinical professionals who are also trained engineers, they represent an important group of leaders who are needed to drive healthcare forward at the intersection of medicine and technology. And so our panel discussion today, or this afternoon, will look at how such physicianeers streamline processes, accelerate the development of technology devices, and advance systems that increase access to care. So in particular, today's discussion, our panel of experts will address the following vital question. How can engineers trained to solve the world's most complex problems use their abilities to revolutionize healthcare into a more resilient and more patient-centered system? Well, that covers an enormous amount of ground, and I absolutely look forward to seeing where our panel members go with that sort of open-ended and broad question. So today's session is moderated by Michael Scott, who's a UW undergraduate from 1990 and a master's graduate from 1992. Michael is head of devices in cell therapy research and development at Novo Nordisk, overseeing development of delivery technology for cellular medicines. And over his 30-year career, he has worked on many medical devices and cell therapy, including a very successful prosthetic heart valve, and now focuses on the development of products that incorporate therapeutic cells and medical devices. So we will definitely welcome your questions, and we'll answer as many as we can later on in the session. I hope you're excited as I am to learn more about how engineering, clinicians, and sort of medicine interact, and we'll be solving some very tough global health problems. So, Michael, thank you so much for being here, and I'm delighted to turn the discussion over to you.
Thank you so very much, Paul. This is a very special opportunity for me, as I truly value the excellent education I received at the University of Waterloo in the 1990s. And this provided me with a very solid foundation for me to build what has been a fascinating, impactful, and very rewarding career so far. It's my pleasure to welcome our audience and our speakers to today's Alumni Speaker Series session. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube for viewing on the alumni playlist, and we'll add that link to the playlist in the chat. A direct link to the recording will be sent out after the session in the coming days. Please do feel free to submit your questions at any time in the Q&A section within the Zoom app, and we will answer as many of those as we can throughout the event. Before we introduce the speakers, I would like to take a moment to publicly acknowledge the traditional territory upon which we live and work as an important step towards reconciliation. The University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within the Office of Indigenous Relations. As we are likely calling from different locations across Canada and indeed the world, I'm coming to you from Copenhagen, Denmark. I also wish to acknowledge the Indigenous communities globally that have lived and continue to live in harmony with nature. I wish to recognize the innovations that came before us and appreciate the sustainability principles that Indigenous communities have lived by. Before I introduce our esteemed experts on our panel, I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I received 2 engineering degrees from the University of Waterloo in 1990 in civil structural engineering and in 1992 in orthopedic bioengineering, and went on to complete a PhD in medical biophysics at the University of Western Ontario, now known as Western University. 35 years ago, I had to choose between engineering and medicine. Biomedical engineering didn't formally exist as a discipline in university at that time. And so I chose civil engineering because at the time I thought, well, this is probably a more family-friendly career, maybe a little more stable. And what I found was that there was this fascinating opportunity for me to leverage learnings from conventional civil structural engineering into what we called orthopedic bioengineering at the time and medical biophysics, things we generally think of as biomedical engineering or bioengineering now. I came to realize that engineering principles could be applied to medical product design, development, implementation. And the closer that I got to patients throughout my career, early on as a PhD student and in an academic research institute, and then later at medical device and cell therapy companies, I realized I had a bigger impact on the quality of life and longevity of patients. It became more and more rewarding. My current research and development work involves development of what we call combination products that incorporate therapeutic cellular medicines and medical devices. So I'm really honored and excited to be the moderator for today's Alumni Speaker Series session, hosting panelists who have diverse backgrounds and experiences, but each with a unique mission of addressing different types of global healthcare challenges. Now, today's conversation promises to be educational and engaging. The panelists are going to share some of their experiences with a goal to help you better understand how to direct your career if you're interested in this fascinating area in developing engineering solutions to global health problems. So we're going to focus on some central themes here. One is the highly interdisciplinary nature of medical product development, the intersection of engineering, medicine, and biology, the concept of transdisciplinary expertise, or a term that we use at Waterloo of physicianeers. And then we'll talk more specifically about opportunities in Canada for engineers to tackle global health problems. So let's meet our panelists. We have 3 esteemed and successful panel speakers for today's session. They are Armin Bakirdzian, so sorry that I butchered your name there. And he's the co-founder and CEO of IntelliJoint Surgical, a Kitchener-based medical device company that is a spin-off of an engineering capstone design project. Armin's focus is on improving patient outcomes in joint replacement therapy. Brian Courtney is an interventional cardiologist at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto, focusing on coronary interventions and acute cardiac care. He's also the co-founder and chief medical officer of Canavi Medical and co-inventor on over 25 issued US patents. Chris Shaw is the president of Baylis Medical Technologies, a leader in the development and commercialization of innovative medical devices in the fields of radiology and neurosurgery. Chris was previously president of Baylis Medical Company. The company was acquired by Boston Scientific in February of 2022. We have full biographies on the event page for this event that we'll put a link on the event page for you to easily access. So please do feel free to read up on our panelists if you'd like a little bit more information. So we're going to start our conversation today by laying the groundwork for understanding the concept of what a physicianeer is. And then we'll get into how they're using their potential to revolutionize healthcare into more resilient and more patient-centered systems. So let's unpack what we mean by physicianeer. Traditional product development teams have been cross-disciplinary, with subject matter experts being responsible for their particular areas of knowledge, deep knowledge experts often working in silos. With the increasing complexity of medical product systems, Transdisciplinary expertise across these silos has become really critical. This could be defined as having deep knowledge in one or more areas of expertise, but also having reasonable depth in related fields that are critical to systems engineering and product integration. I call this knowing enough to be dangerous. You can ask some informed questions. Some examples of the health challenges that we are tackling include things like heart disease, for example. But most of the medical advances of the last 100 years have focused on treating symptoms of disease to improve quality of life, rather than modifying disease progression or providing curative therapies. So if you look at heart failure, which is a leading cause of morbidity and death in the Western world, this is kind of a painful example for me personally and professionally, because I've dedicated over 2 decades of my life to this area. Because 25 years ago, a chronic heart failure diagnosis meant roughly 50% likelihood of survival at 5 years post-diagnosis. Despite significant advances in a handful of areas of cardiac medicine, today those statistics have not changed significantly. It's one of many huge opportunities for engineers to develop meaningful and impactful new treatments. Now, while chronic heart failure is still a major challenge, an area of medical product development has provided a functional cure for one underlying etiology in heart valve disease. Nowadays, a patient who's diagnosed with a stenotic or incompetent heart valve can look forward to returning to a normal quality of life and a normal life expectancy. It's effectively a functional cure. So I'd like to share with you a slide. Can we project our University of Waterloo slide here? And just to make the point that University of Waterloo has generated a remarkable amount of technology and spin-out companies, 3 of which are represented by our panelists here today. And we have provided a real force for innovation in the medical space. And increasingly, we have an opportunity to have even higher impact, which I find extremely, extremely exciting. So if we can just take that slide down, thank you. So I would like to ask our panelists a few questions just to get us a little more familiar with your background and your work. So we'll start with Brian Courtney. What did your university experience teach you, Brian, and what fascinated you about becoming a physician after you became an engineer?
Yeah, thank you. So I went to engineering because I wanted to build things. And I thought computer engineering would be a great field to get into. I had an entrepreneurial spirit before I even went to university. And so I learned how to code and write circuits and had some pretty interesting co-op terms. My first job when I graduated was with a company that designed systems that monitor patients who might be having seizures or brain death or sleeping disorders. And there was a company in Oakville that was making these systems. They made the world's first video and electroencephalography synchronized system. And I was one of 3 key hardware and integration people on that R&D team. And I really liked what I was doing. You know, I wanted to take my engineering skills and be able to apply them to something that had some societal impact and challenged me from a design perspective. So I could write code, design circuits, do testing, and that was my first real commercial foray into medical technology development. I decided to go back to school because I wanted to understand not just how to build circuits and software, but what were the features that were needed? What were the new devices that were needed? What were the things that were going to actually impact patient care? And spending 99% of my time in a room doing just pure R&D and coding didn't give me that opportunity. So I went to Stanford and I did a master's in electrical engineering, but I did it working for 2 cardiologists that were heavily entrenched in the Bay Area in terms of the 300 medical device companies that were within 50 miles of Stanford University. And while I was there, I got very enchanted with seeing people coming in and out of hospital. And
I'm sorry, Brian, we might have just lost you for about 20 seconds.
sorry, someone's trying to call me and they took over my Bluetooth microphone, so that should be gone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So, I really liked the idea of taking my engineering toolbox and then knowing what I could do with it on the other side of the fence, which was try and solve real problems that people walking into hospitals faced every day. And you think of medicine as a domain with a million unsolved problems, and an engineering mindset as something that enables you to tackle those that you think are most important. So that's what got me into medicine. And I guess to round out the picture, by the time I was 40 years old, I finally finished going to school and was an interventional cardiologist doing angioplasty and looking after sick heart attack patients in the middle of the night while doing research and developing innovation initiatives and starting Conavi Medical. I can tell you a bit more about Conavi Medical afterwards, but from a career perspective, that's why I flipped from engineering into medicine. And I probably do as much engineering as most of my classmates do are doing 25 years after graduating.
Super, thanks, Brian. Now, Chris, maybe you can share what your university experience taught you and how well you think it prepared you or didn't prepare you for your career.
Yeah, sure, Michael. First of all, thank you. So I would say my experience at Waterloo in terms of getting an engineering degree was very formative in where we are today in a couple of fundamental ways. One is that kind of understanding engineering from first principles, so being able to look at a problem from very kind of the first principles of the problem issues we have or the engineering principles and work up from there to see what the solutions could be. That is a fundamental skill, has helped me in a number of different industries that I've worked in, which I'll speak about in a minute. And I think the second thing that was instrumental was really the co-op experience that Brian spoke to as well, having worked for 6 different companies, seeing how they operate and not just learn kind of the technicalities of issue, but also managerial capacity or leadership management, how the companies comported themselves. And that in terms of entrepreneurial journey, at least in the early days, was very instrumental in how we kind of organize ourselves. My particular kind of career was a little different trajectory than Brian. I graduated in '86. And my immediate first job was at Bell Northern Research and telecom industry in Ottawa. Then I moved to Northern Telecom 2 years later as a project manager. So we started kind of in the telecom industry. Then in 1990, I left to start Bayless Medical with my partner. And our first kind of venture out was really developing an imaging catheter. And so we got some venture funding. We're doing imaging catheter. So we kind of had to apply engineering from telecom industry to kind of applying to biology and signal processing and electrical engineering, and having the first principles, understanding the issues kind of really helped transfer into that. And we started that project, and the project eventually failed as it was too big for us to carry on, or we were technically not successful. So we closed that down. But meanwhile, we had started to buy and sell finished medical devices, kind of like a distribution of medical devices in Canada. And that was fairly successful, was profitable business. So we switched from kind of doing engineering to really sales and marketing. And that's a whole different venture in its own, learning new skills as how to translate a value to healthcare system, whether it be physicians or nurses or biomedical engineers. But I think the co-op experience helped kind of going into that area. And to a great extent, even engineering helped in trying to translate value of medical devices to physicians, because we're often speaking to electrophysiologists. So we'll articulate that, I think helped in that way. Then we transferred from kind of distribution of medical devices to doing full product development. And that's where I think the engineering skills really came in very valuable in terms of doing product development. And one of the things we'll speak about is kind of interdisciplinary aspect of medical devices, which is really taking a regulatory, IP, medical problem, biology, all these things have to be put together to have a successful commercial product. And I think the fundamental skills really helped in kind of learning about these different areas that are necessary to come together, and then bringing them together to make a commercial product that could be sold and commercialize that further. So I'll leave it at that, then we can get into it a little further.
Super. Thanks, Chris. Now, Armin Bakurjian, hopefully I did better on your last name that time. Maybe you can share what your university experience taught you and what inspired you to get into designing medical devices when, you know, Waterloo wasn't really known as being a medical device hub at the time.
Yeah, it really wasn't. And of course, the image of the university and our ecosystem here in Kitchener-Waterloo has evolved over the years. And of course, I'm thankful to be here to share our experiences over the years. I think I was maybe a little bit more confused going into undergrad than Brian and Chris. You know, my father's an orthopedic surgeon. I'm very fortunate to have somebody, you know, close in my family who really immersed me in the clinical experience from a young age. And of course, with that comes maybe a little bit of pressure to follow in those footsteps and become a clinician myself. Of course, that was an interest of mine, but there was always something nagging me around my interest of trying to figure out how stuff works. And that's really why I pursued engineering. I knew I could always go into medicine if I wanted to after engineering, but really engineering taught me, and I think it teaches everybody, how to solve problems. And in doing so in really a high pressure environment, engineering school is not easy. So, you know, it's a high pressure environment where you're basically figuring out and solving problems and learning how to learn. And I think those are really the concepts that have stuck with me throughout my career. It's, you know, being problems oriented, being open to learning and really focusing on, you know, solving real problems. And really things culminated for me personally in our final year of engineering school, where I was kind of able to combine, you know, the interest in engineering and the desire and interest in medicine to create a medical device. Of course, it wasn't a medical device then. It was, you know, a finicky prototype, let's call it. But we really started from a problem statement. And like I said, I'm fortunate to have a clinician, an orthopedic surgeon in my family. And, you know, I asked my dad point blank, you know, what are some of the problems that you face in your day-to-day life? And is there anything an engineer can do to make those things easier for you, to make life more predictable, to be able to ensure outcomes? And of course, you know, as Brian said, you know, this is the land of a million problems, and engineers are quite good at identifying and solving problems. So it was really applying those first principles, as Chris said, you know, a confluence of interest from engineering and medical devices, or medical, I should say, to solve real clinical problems that impact people on a daily basis. And we've been fortunate to turn that finicky prototype into a medical device and help patients around the world get back to what they do and what they love doing as quickly as possible with the fewest number of complications. So it's an extremely rewarding career, and it's a great intersection of a lot of different disciplines that matter, and I think have a real impact on people's lives.
Thanks, Armin. And that whole concept of impact of your life's work, I think, is what drives many of us into this space, because we do know we can help improve quality of life, we can reduce suffering, we can maybe even help people to live longer. I would like to encourage all of our participants to enter questions into the Q&A applet. We do have a question from Paul Benedetti, who is a Waterloo Systems Design grad from '93. And he describes that recently there have been articles around healthcare workers still spending a huge amount of time on administration. And we still don't have universal electronic health records requiring patients to repeat tests and deliver results. It's just an inefficient system. And so access to personal medical information is limited. Is a primary obstacle holding back technical innovation related to privacy, i.e. legal risk, or are there other roadblocks and reasons? And I'd like to start with you, Brian, if you could.
Yeah, certainly. You know, the whole area of privacy and AI and data sharing and connectivity and confidentiality, I mean, we're getting it from all directions, right? You know, you wake up one morning and sick kids in Toronto General are shut down because of the code gray, which is basically a cyber attack. And they become dysfunctional when that happens. At the same time, you know, someone comes in the middle of the night with a cardiac arrest, and if I have their health card number, I can look up what happens to them and what their blood work was like and get a sense of what their trajectory over the past 6 months was. I can get that very, very quickly when the system works. It only works about 80% of the time, unfortunately, but when it works well. So, there are certainly confidentiality issues. I think there's still, sadly, in 2023 remain some technological issues because the systems tend not to be as reliable as they ought to be. I think there's also issues with respect to maybe a bit of business fence guarding. In other words, hospitals trying to say, this is my data, we're not going to share it. We want the patients to come to us, or we don't want to get merged with this other hospital. So there seems to be a little bit of, schoolyard playbook type stuff happening still to not fully come on board. Having said that, it's clear it's clear that patients aren't going to tolerate this, and the public's not going to tolerate this, and that the way of the future is to have good ways of sharing this data to provide more effective care. And whether that's making the records available to the doctor that's in front of you right now to look after you, whether that's some groups maybe mining your data and saying, hey, do you have a condition that you need to know about? Maybe there's a new drug you want to be aware of, or a new therapy you want to be aware of. You can see how it sort of all in the name of trying to present something that's helpful to the patient could very quickly flip over to something that's marketing. And so there are a whole series of principles that are coming out with respect to how healthcare data should be managed. The Melanoma Society of Canada, for example, has one that's very interesting. We're looking at ways that we can get large data sets together for AI purposes, and do that without the traditional consent that's been required for research, for medical research. But it has to all be done in the right context. It has to have the right oversight and the right governance structures. So it is a very active area of thought with a lot of investment, a lot of potential, and a lot of potholes that you could fall into that could throw the whole off kilter if we don't do it right the first time.
Thanks, Brian. And I can say that in the US, it's similar. There is a fair bit of competition between medical centers. So there's a lack of willingness to share. There are, significant large databases in certain therapeutic areas that even companies can access that are typically set up by professional societies, registration databases, for example, in certain areas. But in Europe, it's particularly difficult because consumer protections seem to have trumped just about everything else. And so I direct a question, and Armin or Chris, you could, either one or both of you could address it. Has the restriction of accessible patient-related information limited your ability to innovate?
I just want to speak on two points. So one is from a patient perspective, as Brian alluded, there's clearly need for integrated system. Having repeat tests, all that doesn't help, consumes a lot of resources, limited resources as is. So can we learn from countries like Taiwan and Estonia, which are smaller countries, but nonetheless, they do have integrated system where data is readily available. You can go from a kind of family office to a clinic, and they'll have access to all of that. And it is proving to be efficient in those countries. So can we learn from them? Somehow they seem to have solved some of the issues that we have. And Canada is very similar to them in a sense of a single payer country, single payer entity versus US. So can we solve that in Ontario if we had the political will and some of the means of putting it together, right? So it is a solvable problem. And Ontario could in fact lead it, or any of the provinces in Ontario, in Canada could lead it because it's a single payer system and there is no competition. Having said that, does it, your question, lack of integrated, does that hurt innovation? I would have to say yes, in a way that we're always having to kind of estimate what is the market size, or what patients have what disease, what could we be treating. So if the data was more integrated, for instance, we would know in Ontario how many patients have atrial fibrillation that is perhaps treatable, what age group they're in, what is market size, and how can we address them, where are they? So which area of the Ontario we should cooperate in. So if we had more insights in the data and the disease state, we could probably target our therapies and certainly marketing into that and make it more efficient than otherwise. And we'd have greater insights into which problems to solve. So you're not kind of looking at a different age group, maybe solve a problem, but just not target the age group. And you often have to guess what that is. So I think more data would certainly help in that way.
Super. Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess you make a good point about single payer systems, and Canada has this opportunity with a pretty good sized population, given the single payer status. In Denmark, every Dane has a digital health passport on their smartphone. And when they go into the doctor's office or they go in to show their COVID passport, it's all part of the same digitally controlled system. But I think we also have some issues to deal with in terms of data security. Every time we read about another data breach, people think, oh my gosh, do I really want to have my health history available online? We need to move on. So thank you very much for those answers and the question. So we're going to move to a different topic. We're going to discuss the interdisciplinary nature of medical product and process development. And so we're going to talk about setting the scene for trying to solve some of the challenging global healthcare problems. I'll give you a little bit of background. I developed cellular medicines to treat conditions like chronic heart failure, Parkinson's disease, and type 1 diabetes. A typical product consists of a cellular drug product, formulations to prepare and deliver the cells at the clinical point of use, and then medical devices to prepare the dose and then administer the dose of cells to the patient, along with clinical procedures to safely implant the product and then manage the patients after the procedure. So this work requires that cell biologists, device engineers, biomaterial experts, formulation scientists, physicians, in vivo pharmacologists all work very closely together to develop a tightly integrated product system that has a bunch of constituent components, some which may be biologics or excipients or medical devices. So increasingly, medical product development requires that engineers understand more than just engineering principles. So given that context, I'd like to ask each of our panelists, how did you end up working at this intersection of engineering, medicine, and biology? And how did your work evolve over time? What do you do differently now compared to what you were doing when you first started in your career? And Armin, I'll give you a chance to speak first.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. First of all, I think, engineers are everywhere. You can't avoid us no matter where you go. We're in every discipline, we're in every industry, and I think that's a good thing. And really the intersection of medicine, engineering principles, and biology, I think is a great place for engineers to be. And for me, I will tie it back to kind of a problem statement. And engineers are excellent problem solvers. And yes, there is the technological piece. That's important. Of course, that is a big component of solutions that need to be delivered to add value to a clinician, to a patient, to a healthcare system. But really, it's the understanding not only the technical requirements, but understanding the user requirements, understanding the environment in which solutions must be successful. Creating a cool little gadget doesn't mean that physicians, clinicians anywhere are going to adopt it. There are constraints that prevent, surgeons, clinicians from doing certain things. Time is important. Efficiency is important. Maximizing resources is important. Delivering clinical benefit and economic benefit is important. And these are all inputs to the problem statement that I think engineers really have to consider when designing a medical device or designing whatever they're designing, especially in our space. So I think that's really an interesting, was an interesting learning for me personally, especially if I try and tie it back to my education when we were, in our final year in mechatronics at UW. And, we were tasked with creating something novel for our capstone project. And I said, I spoke to my dad, and, he was doing hip replacements at the time. And, that's where he educated us on the problem statement. But we did our research and we found that, hey, there are other solutions out there in the market today, but they're not that well adopted. Why is that? It provides valuable information to surgeons that helps them make informed decisions in the operating room. But really, those systems violated the requirements to be successful in the environment. They took too much time. They were closed to certain brands of implants. They were complicated to learn. They were expensive to buy. There were technical challenges with them as well. So I think really broadening the scope of focus in terms of the problem statements is important. And really, that's how kind of my role has evolved over the years, of course, being really focused on the clinician kind of problems from the beginning and trying to marry the clinician's problems with the solutions that we were designing. as a team. And that's kind of where my focal point was. I'm lucky to have two excellent co-founders that were able to, really work on the technology side and make sure that satisfied the requirements from that perspective. But I was fortunate to always focus on the intersection between the clinician and really our product teams or our technology teams. And that's, that's evolved over the years. And, now as an engineer, I'm pointed in maybe some other directions where there are problems. And, the same principles apply of understanding your problems and trying to target solutions that actually, solve those problems. So I think it's really a problem solution space, and where you point it can change over time, but really that's the essence of an engineer. And I'm happy that I'm trained as one.
Super, thanks, Armin. Brian, what are your thoughts? Maybe about 3 or 4 minutes.
It's hugely interdisciplinary. If you make a software company, let's say you wanted to make Waze 15 years ago, you'd hire a bunch of software programmers, maybe some people who understood industrial design or flow, and some people who are really good at optimizing algorithms for graphs and networks. But when you design a medical device, especially if it's an imaging device, Chris said his first device was an imaging catheter. And that's what I've decided to build. And it is a lot of work. I've got ultrasound experts, optical experts, software developers, mechanical engineers, RF engineers, quality management people who do testing for us for biocompatibility. It's really, really broad. So, if you have a software startup and it's 20 people and one of them leaves one day, it's not a big deal. When you have a medical device startup and there are 20 links to the chain and they are each and every one valuable to your critical path, and one of them leaves and it takes you 3 to 6 months to replace one of them, it's really, really challenging. So, the complexity and the challenge of it is part of the intrigue of it, but it's also one of the big risks behind it in terms of an execution perspective. And having some redundancy to be able to manage that complexity is helpful. It really depends on the specifics of the device that you're building. If you just make a simple mechanical accessory, it can be relatively straightforward. If you start building things that have a plug that go into the wall, it starts getting a lot more complicated because there are different standards for electrical standards all around the world that complicate things and different regulations around that. And then once you start throwing software and data sharing and decision support and diagnostic indications to your field of use, it gets very, very complicated very quickly. So one of my early teachers, I asked him, what should I focus on? He said, focus on everything. So I spent a fair bit of time learning about a lot of these different realms to be competent enough to direct people as to how to address the challenges, but also heavily reliant on them to actually make it happen.
Super, thanks. We want to get to a couple of more topics. So Chris, I'm going to give you first crack at the next question. We have another question from our audience. Anastasia Kodorenzi is a fellow at Western University and wanted to talk about engagement with physicians to solve problems. For your respective companies, how'd you actually come about the problem? As in, what was the actual need identification and the clinician contact? Who called who? Did that initial problem statement evolve significantly? Or did you end up working on something close to the initial problem? Maybe, Chris, could you take a minute or so?
Yeah. And also it's a very, very interesting question on how do you start, what problems you're going to solve. In our particular case, we started kind of in medical space, essentially in distributions, we're buying and selling devices. And we noticed kind of set of pockets of issues that could be solved from there. So our kind of initial ideas came from that. And everything we've done since then has really kind of been adjacent to that. So we never went too far. So you see one problem and a second problem, third problem, you intend to solve that kind of adjacent to each other and kind of build a body of knowledge. So we end up at the end is totally different than where we started, but you kind of solved a set of problems that are kind of adjacent to each other and had a number of products come out. In terms of engaging physician, you certainly want to do that early and do that often. But one mistake, we all make is that you may design a device for one single physician, he loves it, but others may not. So you need to be kind of taking input from physicians in a geographical sense, different kind of skill set and different mindset that comes with that. And as an engineer, one of the key mistake we all make, all companies make, including us, is that sometimes we listen to physician too much because they may themselves may not know what is a fundamental problem that's in their head. They just don't know what it feels like in their hands. So you got to think through what is a fundamental issue from looking at anatomy, the disease state, and the physician's usage, and as a combination, come up with a solution. And if you rely purely on physician's input, chances are you're going to end up with the wrong solution because you solved the wrong problem.
And if I can add one other key important difference between physicians and engineers that relates to this, you know, as an engineer, it's all first principles, figure it out, and then build something. When I went to medical school, it was all around learn something from a large volume and then be able to regurgitate it the next day. We're pattern recognition engines, right? And when you start getting input from physicians, it might often be, well, I saw this from another company and I want you to have the same feature, and it becomes a feature matching exercise as opposed to an innovation exercise. And physicians inherently are not used to things that are different because it's not how we are trained to perform well. So all related to the comments that you just made there, Chris.
Super, thank you. So we'll move on to our next topic. Now, all of our panel speakers have built teams and companies to tackle significant medical challenges. As you define roles and job descriptions for product development team members and selected employees, what kind of experience and criteria do you look for? Armin, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think first of all, you know, as when you start a company, there's a small number of people. Everyone is wearing, let's say, one hat. It can be a big hat, of course, and over time, the size and weight of that hat grows. So you must split it into two and let somebody else wear one of those two hats. So that's kind of the way we look at things, is as the you know, weight grows on somebody's shoulders, we must look for others to help us. And that's typically how kind of our company has grown. We kind of divide roles and responsibilities as they become too large for one person to handle them. And really, you know, experience is important. But of course, it's not the be all end all. And I think, you know, we've talked about an ability to learn. And I think that is the core principle for us when we look to bring people on. You know, when you are creating an innovation, you are selling an innovation, you must be innovative yourself. You can't solely rely on your experience. So being humble to learn is important to us. And we actually define a set of values that's important to us as an organization. So, you know, at IntelliJoint, we're a collaborative bunch, we're a thoughtful bunch, we're nimble, we're human, and we're driven. These are the core values that we look for. These are the things that we even assess ourselves on. So it's a good balance between leaning on prior experience, but being able to lean on values as well to modify that experience or modify, you know, whatever you've done in your life to apply it to the specific situation directly in front of you.
Thanks. And Chris, Baylis first of all, has grown remarkably and obviously been successful. Maybe in just a couple of minutes, you can share your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. So first of all, I want to kind of get back to what Brian and Armin are saying earlier about engineering to biology. So first of all, you definitely need kind of technical solution to engineering applying to medicine. But then in order for a company to be successful in the commercial sense and really help patients around the world, a number of other things have to come together, such as patents, IP. You need regulatory understanding of FDA, Health Canada, CE mark. You need understanding of reimbursement, sales, marketing, physician education. You know, you get a best device, so physician can't use it, does you no good, right? Adoption, healthcare system. So you need a variety of skills that are necessary once you kind of have a technical solution, if you will, in order to scale up and help patients. And you need experts in all of these different areas to come together to make a commercial product that's used globally. And one thing I noticed that's kind of constant that helps in all these areas, first of all, if the individual has a passion for this industry, in our world, products take anywhere from 3 to 7, 10 years to come out. So you need long cycles to be able to sustain that. You need passion for this work. It's not you're not writing an app on iPhone that you could go away in 6 weeks. So it has to be kind of long-term passion towards it. You need empathy towards the patients that you're working for, or the physicians who will adopt your products, or empathy towards your co-workers, because it's a complex problems that have to be solved in kind of conjunction with each other. So having empathy, passion for this work. And other one is that having a deep technical understanding of the area. So investing in yourself and constantly learning. So if you're like a regulatory for FDA, it's changing daily. So you got to be able to keep up with that and have deep understanding of FDA to be able to bring that value to the team so team can succeed, because you can have the best product, best kind of the technology, like I say, but if you don't get the approval, it'll do no good to anybody, including the company. And you could maybe have one FDA expert on your team, so they got to be vested in learning and investing and give you the best knowledge they can. So it's really kind of deep understanding, empathy, passion for this industry, passion for this work is what has to come together. I think kind of necessary skills in all of these different areas to be able to take a problem, solve it technically, and have it adopted worldwide.
Super, thank you. So we're going to move on to our last topic, and in this one, we're thinking about planning for the future and what we may need to do to think boldly and out of the box to tackle more and more complex global health problems. So we'd like to hear each of your thoughts on what you see as opportunities for addressing current health problems in Ontario, in Canada, and globally. And I'll start with you, Brian, please.
You know, the number one issue in Ontario or Canada's healthcare system right now is healthcare human resources. There are 150,000 open jobs for nurses and technologists at hospitals in Canada right now. And anything that we can do that frees up their time, that helps us have a successful procedure that avoids complications, that streamlines administrative processes, that helps people being treated as an outpatient instead of an inpatient, will be incredibly important. And, you know, my father's an example of the modern day patient in the sense that he has outlived probably 7 conditions that each and every one of them would have been life-threatening in and of itself. But modern technology, and maybe a son who understands the modern technology to guide him through all this, has helped him survive a vast number of life-threatening conditions. So, you know, our success in healthcare, part of the challenges the governments have as the single payer in Canada is that our successes are keeping people alive, but they're also keeping those people, those patients, they're getting more complex because we keep them alive through all these various conditions, and they're living till their 90s, and lots of centenarians out there. So I think we have to be able to celebrate that, but also find ways to manage that complexity so that we know the history when these people come in the door, the interactions. And it actually is sort of leads to a good argument for device-based interventions over pharmaceutical interventions in some cases, when you can get a mechanical problem to heart failure, like with a valve replacement, like what you've worked on, or an ablation procedure, like what Chris has worked on, or rapid hip surgery so that they don't end up having mobility issues later on. You know, if we can treat things well and quickly and decisively so that they can get back to their baseline of health prior to whatever new event happened, that'll be key for quality of life and keeping things manageable going forward as we support and enable an aging demographic. And it's not just a Canadian phenomenon, it's an international phenomenon. So to Chris's point of this is, you know, you need to have a worldwide mindset. That is absolutely true.
Thanks, Brian. Armin?
Yeah, of course, I agree with everything that Brian said, and maybe I'll kind of add kind of an upstream comment. You know, Brian was talking about some event happening in your life, an intervention, and you're back to, you know, normal as quickly as possible. And I think, you know, looking kind of upstream from that is asking ourselves, what's the difference between a person and a patient, and what can we do to maintain health, you know, as long as possible, and to try and avoid any disease states. And I think that's such an interesting area, and I think it connects so well to the other comments that were made previously around connecting systems, around, you know, just the evolution of healthcare that's required. And I think, you know, we talked about payers here. You know, I think the payers have a huge role to play as well in making that shift from, you know, reactive medicine to preventative medicine. You know, we've talked about silos, we've talked about, you know, disconnected systems, and, you know, financial incentives can make a world of difference. And there's so many kind of levers at play here that can bring the future of medicine to our doorstep so quickly. And, you know, financial incentives and how we pay for healthcare, you know, the barriers that exist between different systems, and the inability, because of that disconnected nature, to assess health innovations in a rapid fashion and adopt them in a rapid fashion, I think are areas of focus, for our industry, for our ecosystem, and even for government. So, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot that we can do. And I think, to Brian's point earlier, that's what patients want. That's what patients deserve. That's what people need. And I think that's the direction we're going.
Super. And Chris?
Yeah, no, I want to kind of add to what Brian and Armin were saying in terms of we're living longer, we have more diseases and whatnot, and they're more managed into that. So if you look at fundamentally, like in our healthcare system in Ontario, say it was really designed for acute care. You have a broken leg or you have a heart attack, they fix you, send you home. But as we get people living longer and diseases are becoming much more chronic, even cancer is a chronic disease now. So as they become more chronic, requires a different type of patient interaction and management. Is hospital only the way to go, or should be more distributed towards outpatient care with better healthcare records help so you're not getting imaging all the time? Other aspect of that we don't often talk about is patients taking responsibility for their own behavior. How many of the diseases are modifiable by behavior in terms of either obesity, alcohol, or exercise? And can governments help propagate that? Societies be created that they're more active, we're more aware of health kind of consequences of own behavior? Because if you rely everything on healthcare system to take care of you, clearly there's not enough resources available ever to do that. But some level of reorganization of healthcare system being more community driven, some level of personal responsibility, people taking that on, and some means of paying. If you start paying for some of this, would you use the resources more effectively? And these are tough political decisions that have to be made. And so far, no one's willing to make these kind of decisions, but they will have to be made over time. And you do see some of that's happening in the US, where your health premiums are a function of if you're managing a sugar level or not. If you're not going for primary care for blood pressure, your premiums will go up. Or I think GE had instituted where if you don't take care of your weight and you don't stop smoking, your healthcare premiums will go up. So they're kind of forcing some of the behavior by payment mechanics. So that would certainly have to be some factored in, even into a Canadian system where you have single payer system, because as is now, health is already close, if not over 50% of our tax budget. So where would you cut? Schools, roads, something would have to give if we keep increasing more on healthcare. So we would have to reorganize ourselves as a society and take more responsibility as individuals, I think, to kind of have a long-term solution.
Super, thanks, Chris. And I guess I'd like to provide an answer that's a little more personally directed to some of our audience members in terms of what can you do. And I have to say, a learning that I've had many times over the years is that engineers have a unique perspective and opportunity because of the way we're trained. Often healthcare providers are too close to the problem, so they can't necessarily see them. An example is when an engineer is in an operating room observing a procedure, oftentimes she can identify and provide solutions for issues that the medical staff may not even see. So I would say, get out there and look for opportunities, because oftentimes the potential customer doesn't even know they have a problem until you've identified it. Yeah. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So Steve Gregory asked a question, and it's related to an example here where a patient with a brain injury doesn't really have options for, say, a medical device-based treatment. And the healthcare system says, well, we're going to give you some physical therapy, or we're going to give you, certain types of exercise or stimulation. But in many cases, he's indicating, healthcare is not necessarily friendly. So do we have any insights? And one observation I would have is it really is important to match the treatment to the underlying root cause. So a medical device may not be the right therapeutic. A drug may not be. Maybe it's a cell therapy. Maybe it's a biologic. So I would say, first of all, make sure we're matching the therapeutic option with the underlying cause of the medical condition. But I'd invite any of our panelists to add their insights.
I mean, I think, whenever you have physiotherapists have a big role in brain injury. I think there's ways to augment it, to maybe have some digital health tool that helps people get some coordination back, or put a training plan or track their progress together. But it'd be hard to, we don't want to go into too many sort of disease specific situations and solutions and problems with the 3 minutes we have left here. But certainly you've just identified one of the million issues that we need to solve on the medical side, for which there's need for engineering tools, engineering solutions.
Fair enough. We've got another question from Natcha Rizan, biomedical engineering student graduating from Waterloo in 26. Brian, in your experience, how does having an engineering background make you a better physician or change your perspective as a doctor? And on the flip side, do you believe going to medical school makes you a better innovator?
I think going to medical, so I'll do the second one. So, going to medical school helped me understand the problem, the context, and the language. And actually, we built a program at Sunnybrook called Medventions, which exposes engineers and scientists to the healthcare system, where they're in the operating room, they're in the cath lab, they're in the clinics. They learn the language, they learn the culture, they learn what the current solution sets are, and they get to observe what the problems are for future solutions. So that's a learning experience that we've developed at Sunnybrook to try and provide those opportunities to engineers to understand the medical side better. When I'm doing my procedures, I occasionally do things that maybe other people in the cath lab might not do. And I have some of the confidence for doing that from my understanding of how the devices work, and I'll come up with some creative solutions. So there certainly are ways that my engineering skills have transported over to my procedural skills, and also communication and team building skills, but those are really not engineering specific. Those are in many, many other disciplines as well. What I would say is that probably the biggest interaction is that working as an engineer and as a physician inspires me to continue to do both. Because I go to my clinics, I go to my procedures, I see patients in the emergency room coming off of a stretcher, and that makes me want to fix them right there and get that gratification for being involved in their healthcare, that satisfaction for being involved in getting them a good outcome. But if I just did that day in, day out, I'd be frustrated. So the engineering side lets me take those experiences and say, hey, how am I going to solve this, not just for me, but for patients down the street and hopefully across the border and around the world. And so that's what inspires me to want to take my day-to-day clinical experiences and, not address all of them, but address a focused number of them in ways that could be replicated to give better outcomes, not just to my own patients, but elsewhere.
Thanks, Brian. And we have one more question from Kevin Wang, who's a first-year mechatronics student in Waterloo. He's interested in pursuing a medical career, especially in areas of ALS and oncology. He'd like to know if there's any advice that we can give him from our experience for people interested in these fields, and whether there's anything that we'd like to change about the current medical device state of the art. Who'd like to start? Armin or Chris, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, for this individual interested in this particular disease states, working on it, first of all, I would say learn much as you can on it. There's a lot of resources available, obviously, so get educate yourself on it. Try to position your situation through work terms and so forth on companies or research institutes or locations that are focused in it, so kind of get you deeper interested. These are big problems, ALS and other aspect of it. Then you can narrow down on some aspect of it that you want to work on, either from a device side or digital solution side or workflow side, and add to the potential solution for a group of patients in that. There's certainly a lot of room to improve. Both of these are very, very underserved areas, but deeper technical knowledge. Then also try to understand what it's going to take for your innovation to be used in tens of thousands of patients. So regulatory, IP aspect, reimbursement, all the other aspects that are necessary to take the invention to masses. I would try to learn those skills as well over time, of course.
Super.
Yeah, maybe just add really quickly. I mean, of course, I agree with everything that Chris said, and I would add, talk to people that are in this world day in and day out. They're the ones that know the problems, that understand the problems. I think, one thing that engineers tend to do or can do is, put their head in the sand and go work on a solution immediately and then try and find a home for that solution after it's been developed. And I would just encourage you to flip that the other way, really focus on understanding the problem fundamentally, which you can't do, without the things that Chris mentioned. And, clinicians are very happy to tell you their problems, and that's a gift, for an engineer. So try and speak to as many people as you can. And of course, one clinician will introduce you to a second, will introduce you a third and a fourth, and, from Canada, from the US, from, internationally, and get as broad and wide of a scope of understanding as you can of the problem, because that will make your solution as accurate as possible.
Super. So I'm going to surprise you guys with a last final lightning round. So in one sentence, I would like you to tell me what you think the most impactful learning or experience you had from your Waterloo education in terms of directing your capabilities in your career. And I will start, to be fair. For me, it's problem solving of large complex systems and the ability to break down systems into smaller, manageable, tractable problems. Who'd like to go next? Brian?
I think, my co-op experience was the most valuable thing for me in terms of teaching me what I wanted, what I liked doing and what I didn't like doing. And it's really what ingrained in me a strong desire to do something that was going to have impact based on the theme that we spoke about earlier in this session. So I would say that the co-op experience at a high level was the most impactful.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, so I would say the co-op experience by far. Second one, kind of interesting, I would say, besides kind of the technicalities of issue, kind of going everything at first principle, looking at it, was the courses I took in organizational behavior. I was in that master's, the management science program, and some of the work on organizational behavior, on degrees of freedoms you have, that can impact how do you solve a problem, or how do you organize teams into that. So it's a lot of learning in that area, kind of interesting. Just one course, I kind of often go back to what we learned in that and apply that, in a kind of strange kind of way.
And Armin, bring us home.
Yeah, and okay, so I'll round it out with grit. I mean, I think what you learn in engineering school is, how to solve problems, incur a little bit of pain, be a little sleepless, and you carry those things throughout your career. Doing important work like we're fortunate enough to be doing is not easy. And really it takes a gritty personality to fight through challenges, to get knocked down, get back up again, and, live to fight another day. And I think, that's what you learn as an engineer. It's not, all rainbows and butterflies and stuff when you're going through undergrad or graduate school, and embrace those challenges, because they will make you better in what you decide to do afterwards.
Thanks so much. It has truly been a pleasure and honestly a lot of fun for me to moderate this panel of exceptional Waterloo graduates. And I really appreciate the folks who are participating and listening to us today, because you're also exceptional. You're going above and beyond to learn more about career opportunities and challenges for yourselves. So I would like to thank my three panelists for participating in today's conversation. I'd like to thank the organizers, Carrie and Gosia and others, as well as Paul for the introduction. And thank you for participating with your questions and just listening with an open mind to us. The next sessions of the Alumni Speaker Series will take place in April or May, so stay tuned. Please complete the feedback survey that'll be available when this session ends, so we know what types of topics you'd like to hear about from us in the future. And in the next few days, everybody who registered will get an email with a link to today's session, so you can watch the recorded video on YouTube and you can share it with friends. And if you suffer from insomnia, we can help you fall asleep. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope that you have a wonderful day. And thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.